of right now, and so that leaves 170,000 left. Pulpit math. Hello, thank you very much. And to go. So thank you very much, of course, for helping him out. If you would like to help him out even further, always obviously able to do that. And I don't think there are not any more envelopes or anything like that, but I'm sure we can get some to you if you do have the ability to help further. So he does still plan at this point in time to move back to Indonesia for a couple of years, beginning in February, to oversee the move and the building of the 3 buildings there, the school buildings and whatnot. So anyway, so please continue to pray for the work there, that it will go as planned. And so right now he's actually in Texas, teaching fishers of men during the week and fundraising on the weekends. So I know he's in the state of Texas. Where in the state of Texas? I don't know that, but he's somewhere around in there, but doing a good job. I do hope to see him when we go there for the Christmas break to home there. He should be there home there in Wetumpka, Alabama. Tonight then, want to talk about a particular individual whose name was Job. There was a man named Job. What a great way to begin a book of God's Word. There was a man whose name was Job. And that man, Job, we know as the patient man because of the things that he had to endure in life. As Jennifer and I were in the Grand Canyon, we were, of course, enjoying that time together and enjoying that great scene and just going hiking and whatnot as we were looking out, taking, of course, a lot of pictures. I took probably, 50, 75 pictures. Jennifer took 500 pictures. But that just goes to show you the difference between the two of us, And I was telling someone this morning, I never, a year, 2, 5 years later, I come back to maybe a set of pictures and why didn't I take more pictures? I'm never saying, I wish I took fewer pictures. I'm always saying, I wish I had taken more. Well, that's why I have her, because she takes more pictures, so that's good. But I took this particular picture because of, here's this, this vast canyon, and there on the very ledge of the canyon is this one little bush, you hate to call it a tree there, just kind of stuck out in the middle of nowhere, just hanging on for dear life, and yet it's green, it's thriving, it's growing. And to see that one shrub, kind of juxtaposed against all of that rock and the vastness of it all is quite remarkable. Sometimes we feel like that, do we not? We're kind of stuck out there all by ourselves, having to endure all of the winds and storms that come our way, and there's no protection from anywhere. That's how Job then felt as the storms of life inundated him, and he had no idea why these things were taking place. One thing he did know, it was not how he was living. That is, it was not because he so sinned against God that these things were taking place. He knew that because he was obeying God to the best of his ability. He did not, however, have a full understanding of what was going on. And of course, there was a conversation that he was not privy to, a conversation between God and Satan. And God allowed for a short period of time Satan to touch the things, or the life, if you will, of Job, except, of course, he could not kill him. 4 points for our consideration this evening, and the lesson will be yours. Let's notice then that Job was a man of patience because he suffered a total loss. He lost everything that he held dear to him. When we come to chapter 1, verses 14 and 15, And we'll even start there in verse 13. There was a day when his sons and his daughters were eating and drinking wine in their eldest brother's house. And there came a messenger unto Job and said, the oxen were plowing, and the asses feeding beside them, and the Sabaeans fell on them and took them away. Yea, they have slain the servants with the edge of the sword, and I only am escaped alone to tell thee. And so here are the oxen that are plowing the fields, getting the fields ready to plant. And then, of course, Job was expecting a great harvest as a result of this planting. So guess what he lost? He lost all the productivity of his lands. A total loss. You know, it's not like, and I know I say this, sometimes I feel like a little bit of a broken record, but it's not like they could go to the convenience store on the corner and grab a quick snack. They didn't have Food Lions on every other corner that they could go and grab some groceries from, by the way, produce from around the world. You know, I was just at the grocery store a little bit earlier today. There was produce from Mexico, there was produce from Chile, there was produce from, I think even California. I saw some Georgia produce. How about that? All over the place. Did Job have that? Now, let it be said that marketing and being able to exchange goods over distances did happen. That did happen. But it was not a quick, it was not a fast process. They did not have the type of seagoing ships that are actually pretty fast today, and trains and the big trucks that we have over land. So he didn't have that ability. So when the Sabaeans came and took away the oxen, there goes all of that harvest. That's a devastating blow, folks. He had a total loss. Then he lost his livestock. Look at me, with me, verse 16, 17. While he was yet speaking, he had barely gotten the words out of his mouth, telling about how the Sabaeans came against the oxen and the donkeys there. There came also another servant. And he said, the fire of God has fallen from heaven and hath burned up the sheep and the servants and consumed them. And I only am escaped alone to tell thee. So here we have livestock that are lost. And more than likely, this fire from heaven, of course, is lightning, causing fire, and all of these livestock out in the field, they're all burned up because of a great fire. We, of course, again, talking about our particular trip, we went to a place there in southwest Colorado, Mesa Verde. Wonderful place, and the Native Americans there that's why we had gone there to see some of the Pueblo Indians there and the cliff dwellers there. Very, very neat. But as we were traveling through Mesa Verde there, all these stumps, all these trees just gray, and some of them gray and black, where over the past 10 years or so, there have been a number of fires, not started by people, started by lightning. And it actually has burned over the past 10 years or so over half of that particular area. So we can understand that lightning is dangerous and can start, of course, fires. So he lost his livestock. Then verse 18, 19, while that servant was yet speaking, there came another and said, thy sons and thy daughters were eating and drinking wine in the eldest brother's house. And behold, there came a great wind from the wilderness and smote the four corners of the house, and it fell upon the young men, and they are dead. And I only am escaped alone to tell thee. If you had told Job, you get to choose 2 out of these 3, you can choose to lose either your livestock or your lands, your harvest, or your children? Which two of the three are you going to lose, and which one are you going to keep? You know the answer to that question. But Job had no such luxury of choosing 2 out of 3. He lost all 3. He lost those ones that were dearest to him. He lost his children in a tornado. What a terrible thing to befall Job. And he had no idea why. And yet he still stayed with God because he was a most patient individual. Second, after he lost all these things, and after Mrs. Job said, what you need to do is just curse God and die. She too, no doubt, was miserable. Job had 3, we're going to put in air quotes, friends. And really it was 4, because at the very end of the book, then you see Elihu come in. And he was the youngster of the gang there. So he only got to speak there at the very last. But Eliphaz, Bildad, Zophar, and Elihu came that they might comfort Job, to be friendly to him, to help him out. And they did for about a week when they didn't say anything. And then they opened their mouths. And so we find in chapter 2, verse 11, here are, in this instance here, these 3 individuals that came to mourn with him and to comfort him. But note how they comforted him. First of all, they accused him of sin and rebellion, that he was so sinful that was the reason that he lost all of these things, that God was striking him down because of the things that he had done against the God of heaven. In Job 15, verses 5 and 6, this is Eliphaz speaking, but all 3, and really 4, said essentially the same thing. For thy mouth uttereth thine iniquity, that sin, and thou choosest the tongue of the crafty. Thine own mouth condemneth thee, and not I. Yea, thine own lips testify against thee. Job was defending himself, saying, look, I haven't done anything against God. And yet they kept saying, not only did you do things against God, but you won't even repent. You will not even confess that you have sinned against him. And therefore, even the very words that you are saying are against God. Now, this man just lost everything. And here are these miserable friends coming in and telling him what a reprobate he is. Even if Job had sinned, would this be the time to condemn him and to put that before him? This would not be the time. It certainly would not be. And actually, Job let them know that as well. Not only did they do that, saying that he had sinned, but notice what Zophar says in chapter 11, verses 5 and 6. Verse 5 and 6, chapter 11. Zophar says, look, you not only deserve this, but you actually deserved worse. God went light on you. Can you imagine losing everything like that? And then someone coming and saying, well, you didn't get half of what you deserved. That's what Zophar then said. Verse 5 and 6. But oh, that God would speak and open his lips against thee, and that he would show thee the secrets of wisdom, that they are double to that which is. Know therefore that God exacteth of thee less than thine iniquity deserveth. Double. How do you double everything? Well, I hope Zophar kept a track of those words, because he's going to be eating them very, very soon. Very soon. They said, you're a sinner, and not only are you a sinner, Job, but you actually deserve worse than what you got. God was gracious to you. Throughout all of this, Job then kept saying, look, if I just had my day in court, if I just was able to talk to God and put out my case before Him. What's the old saying? You better be careful what you wish for. Job, you better be careful what you wish for. How many today say, I just wish I could talk to God and let Him know what I think about some of the things that He does, is doing, or has not done to my enemies? Well, through Job, God has already spoken to us about those things. In chapters 38, all the way really to the beginning of chapter 42, God speaks. And a conversation with God is less a two-sided conversation, and it's more of a fearful approaching and God addressing and asking you questions that you cannot answer. Those that want their day to put in order the things that they have, from time to time, by the way, by way of illustration. Every once in a while, especially if, let's say, Trevor or one of our other full-time military individuals, they get deployed and they tell me, oh, Brother Hatcher, I'm getting deployed on such and such date. Oh, no, I don't want you to go. I'm going to have a talk with Uncle Sam. That's what I'm going to do. And of course, we understand that that's never going to take place. But let me say this. I would have a better chance of swaying and having influence and getting a word in edgewise with Uncle Sam than I would the God of heaven. A far better chance. In other words, there would be a chance here in this life, in that situation, and there is not one with God. Why? Because He is the God of all creation. He has all authority. He has all knowledge and all wisdom. And guess what? I do not. And the same then was true for Job as well. God is the one that makes all of the demands. As the created, Job and I, we do not stand a chance. We do not make any demand. If God makes all the demands, that leaves me none, folks. So I cannot make any demands of God, because that's not how that works. Chapter 38, verses 1 through 4. Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, Who is this that darkeneth counsel by words without knowledge? Gird up now thy loins like a man, for I will demand of thee, and answer thou me. Where wast thou when I laid the foundations of the earth? Declare if thou hast understanding. And of course he really continues for the rest of the time, giving Job illustrations and questions about which he could not answer, nor had the very beginning of knowledge of any of these things. And we would be just the same as Job. Why? Because God is the superior being. And you can read for yourself here, Job 38, 7 through 11. Just read all of Job 38, 39, 40, 41. And notice the great creatures that God created. And man really has no ability to have sway over them. That is to create them and make them do instincts. Talk about animal instincts. God made them a certain way. We react to the instincts of animals. We understand that they have those instincts. We didn't give them those instincts. Chapter 38, 7 through 11, it talks about the ocean and how that the ocean has limits. And did we put the limits on the ocean? It comes up to the seashore and just stops. That's it. That's all it gets. It's raging out in the open ocean, but it's just quiet there on the seashore. Who did that? God did that. And of course, all manner of other subjects that Job could not answer, and really neither can we, because God has all the knowledge and he can ask the right questions. Do you know what's one great mark of intelligence? Let me tell you. When someone can ask the right questions. In other words, they know enough to ask the right questions. That's intelligence. People who are ignorant in certain areas, many areas, they want to know about something. Let's say if, I don't know, we could throw any subject out there about which nobody has any idea about. We wouldn't know what questions to ask to understand it. God's not like that, though. He gets to ask all the questions because he has a full understanding of everything. Where are stars? What are they all made out of? How many hairs are on each individual head of each individual human being that has ever lived? God can answer all those questions and ask the right questions as well. We then cannot. And then finally, at the very end of this wonderful book, we have the fact that Job then, even though he had a great loss, even though his friends were not what they should be, even when he got his day with God and he was, for all intents and purposes, more humbled at the end than he was even going through his difficulties. Even through all that, guess what happened to Job? Because he was a patient individual, he received greater blessings. Zophar, what now? Job did deserve double, and God gave him double. But not double cursings, double blessings. How is that possible? Because God knows everything, and his grace is able to give when man is only able to take away. He received real help. Go with me to verse 11, there at the very end of Job chapter 42. At the very end, those 4 friends, they were not very good to him, but there were others out there that were. Then came there unto him all his brethren, that's his brothers. Apparently Job was part of a big family too. He had a big family as far as his wife and children, but he was a part of a big family, brothers and sisters. His brethren came to him, his sisters, all they that had been his acquaintance before, they did eat bread with him in his house, and they bemoaned him and comforted him over all the evil that the Lord had brought upon him. How did they comfort him? Every man also gave him a piece of money, and every one an earring of gold. And Job was such a man, did he just take all that money and gold and just waste it? No, he did not. He used that which God had given him through his brethren and acquaintances. He used that to the glory of God so that God could bless him in a double measure of what he had before. And so he doubled his lands. He doubled his livestock. He doubled then 10 more children as a result. Verse 10, go back up one verse. And the Lord turned the captivity of Job when he prayed for his friends. Also the Lord gave Job twice as much as he had before. And you go down there to verse 12 about the doubling of everything. Verse 13, 7 more sons and 3 daughters. Verse 14, how beautiful the names of his daughters. In verse 15, how beautiful then they were. And the long life that Job lived there in verse 16. He was a great blessing to others. Those 4 men that laid a claim against Job and saying, Job, you're rebellious. You deserve worse punishment than what God actually gave to you. You are a sinner, and you need to repent of these sins and confess that you are one who is against God. God said, I'm angry with you, you 4 men. You give your sacrifices, you give your sacrifices to Job, and he'll sacrifice for you, and I'll accept him. That's verse 8. And guess what Job did? He took their sacrifices and sacrificed for them so that now they were accepted of God. What a blessing he was. Then you skip over to verse 16, the last two verses of the book. Job lived 140 years, and he saw his sons and his sons' sons 4 generations, and he died being old and full of days. You see, Job was a great blessing because he was a man of patience. Even though he endured great difficulties, in the end he was blessed by God. Today, God desires to bless you. He might not bless you physically. He might not bless you monetarily, but he will bless you spiritually. The devil is your adversary. He's accusing you of all kinds of things. If you but come to God, he will forgive you, and all your sins will be washed away, remembered no more. How are you going to be remembered in this life? As one who followed after self and the devil, or one who was righteous and did those things that were right and good? Leaving a legacy, leaving your children and grandchildren with a model of righteous living. If you need to obey the gospel by believing in Jesus the Christ, repenting of sins, confessing that Jesus is the Son of God, being baptized for the remission of sins, you can do that this very hour. Perhaps you have done that and you have not been the individual of patience that Job was, and you need to make things right with God. If you have a need tonight, why don't you come right now while we stand and while we sing.
One can marshal.